Hello, my sewing friends. Here are my thoughts on McCalls 7831. My name's Jen, and this is my sewing room where I make stuff like this. This is McCalls 7831, and I thought I would tell you what I think of it, just my thoughts in general about it. It looks like this. This is a little jumper. It is a learn to sew for fun pattern where they tell you you will learn to sew with difficult fabrics. You will learn to apply a buckle, and you will make a patch pocket. So these are all really good things to be able to learn. And I would say that generally speaking, this is a pretty good pattern for a beginner. I like it. I used a yard and a half of this home deck fabric. It kind of feels like canvas that I found at Hobby Lobby. I washed it and dried it, and I'm not sure if it shrunk or not because I think it's a cotton. It may be all cotton, I can't remember, but if not, it's a cotton blend, mostly cotton. And so I didn't end up having enough for the facings, so that was fine. I just used this, actually it's an old curtain for the facings, and that worked great because I wanted to do a lot with contrast with this. I also used navy blue thread, and so I did all the contrast top stitching with this. I did add 2 inches to the hem. And that was because this is cut pretty short. So yeah, that's probably fine if you're short, which I'm not terribly short. I have long legs, so I'm not that short. I'm 5'6½". And if you are young, it's probably really cute on you, short. For me, not so much. I'm not so much young, but I just wanted that extra little bit. And I used about a 1-inch hem. I think it calls for an 1.5 inch hem, so that was fine. Just that little bit of extra was all I needed. I did not do a center front seam on this. I meant to follow the pattern exactly, and I just wasn't paying attention. I laid it out on the fold, and then I realized, oh, you're supposed to have a center front seam going down here. I went ahead and just laid the fabric so that I took away the seam allowance and then recut the edge, and it was fine. So no biggie. In fact, that would be an easier way to make this because then you would alleviate the one seam. Although, I don't know, it's kind of a design feature because you top stitch it. So there are a lot of chances to practice your straight line sewing with this pattern. And so that's one of the reasons I think it's so good for beginners. You top stitch everything. You top stitch the pockets, the straps, the edges here, the center back seam and the center front seam. You turn and top stitch. The only thing that doesn't get top stitched on this whole garment is the side seams, pretty much. So yeah, it's a great pattern for that. And you know, when you're learning to sew, a lot of straight line stitching is really good for you to do. It just kind of, you know, you learn how to line things up with a seam allowance and with your seam guide on your sewing machine and all of that. It's just a really good thing to do when you're starting out. Couple of things that I noticed about the way this was constructed. One thing was they don't call for any understitching on the facing, nor do they call for you to finish the bottom edge of the facing. Well, that seemed odd to me because most patterns that I've seen will tell you you need to turn under, do a narrow hem on the bottom of the facing, or you need to use pinking shears or something like that. I looked all over those instructions and I couldn't find anything. I always serge mine. So I have a serged edge on the bottom of that facing, but if you didn't know to do that, you would not have done it, and you should. So I kind of, you know, I don't know if they missed that step or what happened there. And they also didn't call for understitching, and I always understitch every kind of facing that I ever do. And I think that's a really, really good habit to get into because it gives you a much more finished edge to any time you are attaching a facing. It's just one of those things that beginners should always do, and that way you get in the habit of always doing that, and then you know your garments will always look a little tiny bit more finished. Evelyn Wood has a good video on why you should do that, and I will link that for you. the other thing was that the straps are interfaced, and I had a devil of a time getting these things turned inside out because the strap is cut in one long piece and you fold it in half horizontally, and then you stitch the one edge and then this edge, and then you turn it inside out, and that's your strap, and then you top stitch it. Oh my gosh, I had such a hard time because this is a home deck fabric. It's like a canvas. It's relatively heavy. And if you're doing this out of like a velvet or a velveteen or a velour or a denim or any kind of a fabric that's got some weight to it, you're going to have trouble with those straps if you put interfacing in them. With most heavier fabrics, you really wouldn't need that interfacing. And to be honest, because you do all this top stitching, that gives a lot of body to the straps. And I probably didn't need to do the interfacing. If I were going to do this again, what I would do is instead of taking that long piece and then folding it and then sewing a seam on that bottom edge to then turn it, making it like a tube, instead what I would do is fold it wrong sides together, and then on the raw edges I would fold up the seam allowance so that the two seam allowances meet, and then top stitch all of it. That would make it so much easier. You wouldn't be fighting to turn the thing inside out, trying to get the top to slide down through the middle. Oh, no. There's a much easier way to do it. And yet, if the pattern had told you to do it that way, it might have given you trouble if you were a beginner, because that's a lot of lining things up and trying to get them to match exactly. It's much easier to top stitch when your seam is already done and you've already turned it, so anyway. Let's see. The only other thing was the pockets. I don't do pockets the traditional way, and this calls for you to do them the traditional way. And what you do is you take, traditionally, you form a hem on the top of the pocket, and then you fold the edges to the inside along the seam line, and then you just top stitch it. Well, I don't do that. I just cut two pockets, put them right sides together, and then leave an opening at the bottom, sew them together and turn them inside out. And then I've got a finished edges everywhere. And then I put that opening on the bottom because I'm going to top stitch right over it when I attach it to the garment. Well, I always do that. This time I did a little bit of a variation on that. And I'm going to try and explain it. I may not get this right, but here's what I did. Okay, so I have two pieces here. I have a lining piece and then I have my actual pocket piece. And all you're going to do is sew one side if it's a square pocket, or the top edge if you have an irregular cup pocket, like a rectangle or something else. And that's what I've done here. I just sewed it, the two pieces together at the top, right sides together, and now I'm just going to press it. You can press it to one side or press it open, however you want to do it. And then what I'm going to do is take them and put them right sides together again, but then I'm going to pull this lining down so it extends a little bit below where the pocket piece is. And essentially, I'm folding that pocket piece on the place where the pattern told you to fold on that line. So when I flip it over like this and you see it with the actual pocket piece towards you, again, right sides together, all I'm going to do is leave an opening at the bottom and then close up those side seams. And that's it, really. So that's what I've done here. And all that is left to do is to go back in and clip the corners, trim the seams, and then even up that bottom edge. It's always good to trim your seams down whenever you're going to turn something inside out, or when you have a facing or, an edge that you have to turn somehow. So clipping the corners, trimming the seams. I'm going to even up this bottom edge and cut away that excess lining. Clip these corners, and then I'm just going to turn it inside out. And what I'm left with is the perfect pocket. And I've got that piece at the top that's like a facing. And now, I've got this opening at the bottom, but that's just going to get top stitched when I sew it onto the garment. So easy peasy, just top stitch, and there's your pocket. You're done. So by making that inside part a little bit shorter, but still sewing it to the top edge, what you do is you create the same thing that you would have created had you done it the traditional way. I don't know. You can do it either way. I don't always go to that much trouble. I just sew two of them, turn them inside out, and then stitch them onto the thing. But this time I just thought, oh, let's just do that a little bit different. So that was basically it. Do I think this is a good pattern for a beginner? Yes, I do. With obviously always with Jen, there are caveats, of course. I think if you're learning to sew and someone is there who is an experienced sewer that can give you some little tips along the way to help you, then I think that's a really, really good way to do this. And in fact, I think this is an excellent pattern for that kind of a situation. If you are new to sewing and you don't have anybody helping you, then it still is a good pattern that will teach you some things, if nothing else, all that straight line sewing. But I think they left out those couple of things with the facing, no understitching, and then they didn't tell you to finish the bottom edge of the facing. And then also the straps will give you trouble. So if you know that going in, then this is going to be a good pattern. So it gives a thumbs up for me. I think it's very cute. It reminds me of an indie pattern. I think it's called the York Pinafore, and I forget who that's by, but I like this better, the way it looks, because this part is wider, and on the York Pinafore it's much more narrow, and I like the wider look. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know if you've made this pattern. If you have thoughts, I would love to hear it. And that's it for now from me. So I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.